Welcome back to the LinkedIn clone. In this video we'll be continuing to use Ionic and Angular to build out the authentication pages of our user interface. So as you can see, we've built in the sign in page and we've also built in the sign up page. So we can also check out the mobile view and we can see that it looks nice there too. And likewise for the sign in page. So let's build this out. So let's go into our project, and in the LinkedIn front end project, in the source folder, in the app folder, we want to generate a new page using Ionic. So we can just say Ionic generate, and we can get a page, and we'll just call it auth. And what this has created for us is essentially created a new section for us. So we've got this auth section that's separate to our home section. So there's the modularity involved with that. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this spec file here. And I'm just going to open up the auth module. And we're going to need the forms module. So I'm going to copy that from the home module. And it's going to be an import because it's a module and it's coming from Angular forms. So we're going to do a template driven form here. Okay, so it actually already came with the forms module. But if you didn't get that import for whatever reason, you can just add it there because we'll be using ng model to bind our template to the TypeScript. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and just start to build out our page here. And the approach that I'm going to take to this is I'm going to put the login and sign up page on the same page because it's going to have some very similar appearance, and I don't want to duplicate two components when I can just toggle two fields on and off. So let's start by creating the form, and I'm going to do everything within the Ion content. And if you've been following the series, I may have missed using the Ion content on the previous page and I had to align it using Flex. Well, you can just use Ion content to bring things up to the top. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to have a class on a div container, and I'm going to call this title container. And this is where we're going to have our LinkedIn text alongside with the LinkedIn logo. And inside there, I'm going to have an Ion text. And on the same sibling level, I'm going to have an Ion icon. So let's just go ahead and use Emmet to get those. And I'm going to add a class to the Ion text. I'm going to say this is called LinkedIn text. And I'm also going to have a similar class on the Ion icon. So I'm going to call this LinkedIn icon. And I'll just get rid of one of those extra K's there. And the Ion icon, it's going to be the LinkedIn logo, and this is in the documentation for the Ion icons. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this one, logo LinkedIn, and I want that to be that primary blue color. So I'm going to set this to primary, and then this bit here, I'm going to say this is linked. And then I'm going to open up the styling associated with this. And for that title container, I just want to center things, and the easiest way to do that is just to say display flex, justify content, center, align items, center, And I'll give it a little bit of margin top, so there's a bit of spacing between the very top of the page and the LinkedIn text there. And for the LinkedIn text, we'll make the font size a little bigger. So we'll make it 36 pixels. And we'll give it a little bit of weighting. So we'll make that 700 because it's going to be the main heading. And I'm going to have a LinkedIn icon here. And I'm going to make the font size 44 pixels. So that's just a little bigger than text. But it looks good. So I'm going to run an Ionic serve so we can see where we're at with that. So we can see we've got the LinkedIn logo out the top. Now I just want to make that linked part of the LinkedIn the primary blue color. So I return to the iron text and I add the property color, primary. So now that looks good. Now we want the subtitle on the LinkedIn page. So below this div here, we can have another div and we can just give this the title, the class subtitle subtitle container. And I'm just going to type in the text that was on the page at the time. So make the most of your professional life. And then I'm going to go into the styling of that. And I'm just going to duplicate this down and remove a few things. So I'll remove this here. And of course you could refactor this to your liking. But I just want the flex and the centering of things. However, I will just add a little bit of margin left and right, and this is because when the mobile resizes to a smaller screen, I don't want the text to be on the very left, I want a little spacing there. So I'll also make the font size of this 30 pixels, and I'll do text align center. So this should be subtitle container. Okay, cool. So next we want to start working on our actual form and our card. So let's do that. So still within the iron content, everything's in iron content. But let's make our form here. And we don't need an action on it. But we will need a template variable. So we can just call it form. And this is going to be bound to the model. So we'll just say ng form. And then we're going to have an ng submit here. And I'm going to have a method called onSubmit. And we can just go to the TypeScript and just copy that method name just to get rid of the error. And just save it like that. So now we actually want to build out our card. So we want this to be an iron card. Now what I'm going to do is there's going to be two types of views here. One's going to show the name and the last name if the submission type is join. So if the submission type is join, we'll show them the name and last name, but if they've already joined, then they're just going to sign in, so they don't need that. So what I'll do, just to get things going here, I'm going to come to the TypeScript file, and I'm going to, well, firstly I'm going to look at the form there based on the template variable. So I got this template variable called form. So I can use the view child decorator to look for that. and we'll call that form, and that's going to be of the type ng form, and that's going to be used later on so we can detect the variables from the inputs. But I'll also have the submission type, and I'm going to make my own type here. It's either going to be login or it's going to be join, and by default we'll just make things login. So in our iron card we can have a, well, we want to have a item here, but we don't want this item to show in when it's not joined, so the first name. But let's just make a container so it doesn't do anything in the DOM, and we can add a ng if statement here. So if the submission type is equal to join, well then we can, and there's one extra apostrophe there, or quotes. So if the submission type is join, we will show an iron item, and this iron item is going to have an iron label and an iron input associated with it. So we can get those. Now we want the label to be float up, so when we click on it, the text goes up to the top of the input field. So we can say we want the position to be floating, and this is for the first name. And on our input, we want to give this a variable here, and we'll say first name input, because we want to access that input variable if there's any errors and just display an error. So we'll bind that to the ng models. And of course, to use that we need to add ng model, and this is going to be of the type text with the name. We'll give it first name. This is what we're going to access in our TypeScript file, and our validation for our template driven form is required. So let's just save that and see what we get. And actually I might make this not join. So we can see we get this field here. Of course we're going to need to add more fields and style it. So let's go ahead and do that. So one thing I might add here is I might add the error message. So just below the iron item here, we can have an iron text, and I choose an iron text so I can add the color property of danger. So you get that red there. And of course we only want this in the case that, well, the first name input is not valid. So we're just accessing the template variable we defined above on line 18. So if that isn't valid, but also we want to make sure that the field itself has been touched, because it could be that we haven't touched the field yet and we don't want to see an error straight away. So we can just add that there like that, and we can just choose our text in here to be whatever we like. So we could just say please enter your first name. So we save that, and we see we get this error message formatted below. So let's do the same thing. We'll more or less duplicate this, and I'm going to change this back to join. I was just demonstrating what was going on, but I will go ahead and duplicate this entire section here, and basically we just want to change this to last name. So we'll just change the variables from first to last. So we've got last name input, name, last name, it's required as well. And we'll get that danger message if that last name input is not valid and it's been touched. So I'll just save that. Now, we more or less want to copy this iron item now and the iron text, but we're not getting the container because this is going to be there in both cases. So if they're on the join page or the sign in page, you're going to need to get your email. So what we can do is we can say for the email, now instead of last name here, we can change this to email, and then we'll just need to change this text here, prompting them to please enter your email address. So we've got that, and this is going to be of the type email. So we can copy this down one more time for our password. So here we can type password. Please enter your password. It's going to be of the type password. And actually I can just go ahead and do a Control D of the word email and just change that to password. Okay, so we can see that we get email and password showing because by default we're on the login view. Let's go ahead and start to, well, let's add a button. And then we'll start to style things up a little bit. And actually, just below the button, if you are on the sign up view, there is a terms and conditions you need to click on and agree to. And I'm just going to simulate that paragraph. So below this iron text here, I'm going to add a p tag with a class called terms and conditions. And I'm going to generate an iron text with the color property of primary. And I'm going to Shift Alt down this 2 times because essentially there's a bunch of text that says by clicking agree and join, you agree to the link in, and then it states the things that you're agreeing to with a link of some sort. So we're just going to simulate there's some sort of link there. So we'll user agreement, privacy policy, and I'm going to add a comma here, and also the cookie policy. So we can see that we get that blue there. Now we want to make the weighting a little bigger in that. But one thing I should probably do is turn it off for this view mode. So here above we defined if it's the submission type of join, you can show something. So we can just copy that onto our p tag here. And of course we need the closing quotation mark. So now when we save this, we shouldn't see it this time. Now we also need some way to submit our form. So let's just go ahead and get an iron button here. And we want our iron button, we want it to be disabled in the case that our form is not valid. And in this example, our validation is just the required field on the inputs. So this is going to be of the type submit because we've got the the onSubmit method above on the form. This is going to be rounded, and we want it to expand to be the width of the region that it contains. And what we're going to do is we're basically, this text on the button, it's either going to say sign in or accept and join. So in the case that it says log in, we want to say on the button it's sign in, and in the event that it's not log in, we want to say accept and join. And there's going to be a way to toggle this, of course. So we see we've got this button here, and I will add the toggle functionality. So below this form here, I'm going to have a div that says it's going to have a class of toggle text, and basically we're going to sort of copy this logic here. So if the submission type is login, we're going to say we're going to give them the option to go to the join page. So we're going to say new to LinkedIn, and it's obviously all on the same page, but just to switch the appearance of the page. And alternatively, we'll say already on LinkedIn if they're on that page and they want to go back to the other view. So we can have an iron text here, and this is going to be the thing that's actually navigating for us. So we'll give it a color of primary to distinguish that it's a button, or the appearance of a button. And we can just go ahead and copy this logic once more, and we'll just say join now or sign in, and we'll save that. So just on this iron text here, we'll add a click event, and we'll say toggle text. This is what we'll call it, toggle text. So of course we need to define that method. And this is how we'll implement the functionality. We'll say if something, we'll show the type of join, else if something else, we'll show the type of login. So, okay, we've got this submission type variable here, and it's set to login by default, because usually when you go to a website and you're not logged in, it will take you to the login page. It's only for the new users that need to sign up. So we're going to say if the submission type is equal to login, we're going to do something, and if the submission type is equal to join, we're going to set the variable back to the opposing variable. So you could have also done this with a Boolean approach and set it not equal to the variable, but here I've chosen this method here. So basically all I want to do is, if you click it and it's on the login page, well, just set the submission type equal to join, and likewise if it's on the join page, well, just submit the submission type to login, and that's going to and of course that should be 1 equals to assign the variable, and I'll save the template as well. And now we can see if we click on join now, we get the other fields, and if we click on sign in, we back to the original view. So what we want to do is we obviously want to style the page a little bit so things are looking a little cleaner. So let's come back to our style sheet and add in a few things. So we've got our title container and our subtitle container already. Let's go ahead and start to work on our form. So we want to have a max width of 400 pixels. And we want to center the form, so we'll say margin is auto. And then for the iron card that's nested within our form, we want to remove some of the box shadow, or all of the box shadow, so we'll set that to none. And we'll keep our border consistent with our other borders, so we'll make that solid E1, E1, E1. And then we'll go ahead and we'll just put padding around the whole card of 24 pixels so the text isn't too close to the edge. Now I did have this inside of this form here. I had an iron card that's wrapping things, and I also had for the terms and conditions a terms and condition class here, so I'll copy that. And I can add that into the nesting of the iron card. So that will have a font size. It's slightly smaller, so it's less readable or less obvious because it's not the emphasis of the page. And we'll center things, and we'll just give it a little margin top here of 16 pixels. And then for the iron text within there, I'm going to give it a font weight of 500 just to make it a little more emphasized for the buttons you're clicking, or well, the appearance of that. And then we're going to, for our iron button, we're going to give it a little margin top, and it's going to have the same offset of 16 pixels so things look nice and aligned. And we'll go ahead and we'll just make this button a little bigger. And of course you could be using the utility methods and properties associated with Ionic, but because I'm doing a clone here, I'm going to need to have some custom very specific numbers and stuff like that. So feel free to go ahead and use the utility methods. Okay, so yeah, so basically this here still isn't centered, so we'll go ahead and we'll work on that, but this is already looking much better. So let's just go ahead and tidy that up. So in our auth page, we had this toggle text class here below the form. So what we'll do, we'll just add that class in here, and once again we'll just display things flex and make everything centered. It just makes everything easier. And then the iron text here, once again we can make the font weight 500, and if you're seeing patterns that you'd like to refactor, please feel free, but I'm just going to stick to this mode here. I'm going to make it such that when you hover over those links, it looks like it's a button. So I'll make the cursor pointer, and I'll give this one a little bit of margin left to space it out a little bit. And in the event that you hover, we want to have the text decoration equal to underline. So let's save that. So we can see that we've laid things out here nicely. We can type in into email, and if we type in something, now obviously that validation, you'd have to add some more email validation, but this is just the layout, and it's just got the required, and if I got nothing there, it says please enter your address. Likewise, if I touch the password field and click off it, it will say please enter your password, and it actually hides it because of the type of password. And if I go to join in, you can see I haven't touched the first name or last name, so I can just go ahead and type something in here. And if I clicked on last name and click off or delete first name, you do get the validation errors. And this should be all looking good on mobile view as well. So basically all I want to do is just add a little bit of TypeScript code just to set up the data that we're going to be using. So essentially all that's left is when we call the onSubmit method. So basically the this button here, it's of the type submit. So when you click that, it's going to call this onSubmit method here. And I've started the shape of it. But basically, since we've got this view child of the form, we can actually access the form values. So in all cases, we're going to need the email and password. So we can actually use object destructuring here, and we can get out this .form.value. Now it will be noted that if you were to say this .form.value .first name, it's in with this approach, it's the typing's not there, so you could basically type anything you wanted there, and that's just because in this instance we've chosen to not pass in the form values, but rather we're referencing the template itself. So because of that, we're going to have to do a couple of extra checks, and there's no real right or wrong way to do things, it's just personal preference. So basically I'm just going to say if there's no email for whatever reason and no password, just return out. So we basically want to do two different things in two different cases, and it depends on the submission type. So actually we can just copy this here, and if the submission type is login, we basically want to, for now we're just going to console log things. So we're just going to say handle login, and then I'm going to print out the email and password. But if it's the join case, we've got the email and password through object destructuring of the form value, but we will also need the first name and last name, and that's coming from the form value. So I'll do another check here. So this is checking in either case when you click on submit, and it should be handled by the disable thing, but it's just an additional check here. But basically, if the first name and last name isn't there for whatever reason, we'll just return out. But otherwise, we're going to console log to handle join, and I'm going to get the email and password, and alongside with those variables, I'm going to get the first name and last name. And basically, I'm just making sure that I can get the right variables and nothing errors because it's undefined or something like that. And these console logs will be refactored in a subsequent video to handle the login or the joining. But with that, let's say I had something here, it knows I'm in the logged in view or the login view, so I can click sign in here, and in the console it actually shows you the login method. But if I change to the sign up method, we'll notice that it does preserve the email and password fields here. But if I additionally add in John Pepink, accept and join, we can get those methods. So basically we have the variables and the data and the input and the validation that we need to send to the back end. We've created our whole UI and it's mobile responsive, and so that leaves us to actually implementing the sign in and sign up functionality. So what I'm going to do in the next video is I'm going to return to the backend code, and I'm going to use Nest.js to build out the multi login approach. So all of the backend code that's that generates the JSON web token and gives it to the front end, so you can validate request on the front end and secure routes and all of that stuff. And it's going to also use Passport, and it's going to have multi-role accessibility and authorization associated with that. So there's going to be an admin view and a user view, and if you're not logged in as well. And if you're only interested in the front end implementation, you can just go ahead and clone the repo that's in the link below and just run the back end. Or you could just put in your fake data, because when we go back to returning to building the actually implementing that functionality on the front end, you can just bypass the routes just by returning true or false. So we'll see that coming up. And if you appreciate these videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Nearly at 1,000 now, guys, so please help me out. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.